of international humanitarian law, starting with a full, transparent, and independent investigation into reports of all of these violations. In this regard, we call upon Myanmar to cooperate with ongoing international accountability mechanisms and with the Special Envoy, and allow her free access to meet with the leaders of Myanmar who have been detained, as well as with the leaders of the Rakhine community, the Rohingya community in the Rakhines. We reiterate further our firm position in support of the Muslim Rohingya people, and we call for ensuring their safety and security and recognizing their fundamental rights, including the right to full citizenship and the creation of conditions conducive to the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of all Rohingya refugees and IDPs. In conclusion, the OIC members welcome the international community's efforts, the United Nations, ASEAN, and the government of Bangladesh in finding a solution to the refugee crisis, and reiterate their call to Myanmar to guarantee their safe return to their homeland in dignity and peace, and grant them their full citizenship rights, and to ensure the nonviolent handling of the events in Myanmar, and protect the safety and well-being of all the people of Myanmar. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States.
Mr. President, thank you for convening the membership here today, and thank you, Madam Special Envoy, for your briefing. It is an honor for me to be addressing the General Assembly for the first time, and it is fitting that this is such an important topic. Let me be clear from the outset. The United States continues to strongly condemn the military coup in Myanmar, and we condemn the security forces' brutal killing of unarmed people. And I would, like others, like to welcome and commend the courageous and brave statement made by the Myanmar Perm Rep here this morning. Like the Perm Rep, the people of Myanmar are making their voices heard. Doctors and civil servants, grocery store cashiers and milk tea servers, delivery drivers, all rig operators, and artists. They are marching in the streets. They are raising red balloons and banging pots and pans, and they are demanding their democracy back. We stand in solidarity with them. We stand with the millions of people in Myanmar who have displayed courage and determination to reject this military coup. We stand with them as they call for a return to peace, democratic governance, and rule of law. The military has tried to silence those calls with social media and internet blackouts, but we still hear the people of Myanmar loud and clear. As President Biden said, the United States has and will continue to take actions in close coordination with allies and partners. We will show the military that their actions have consequences. Violence against those exercising their human rights and fundamental freedoms is unacceptable. It is time for the military to immediately relinquish power, refrain from further violence, release all those unjustly detained, and restore Myanmar's democratically elected government. And it is time to provide unhindered humanitarian access so that life-saving humanitarian assistance reaches all the people in need. For our part, the United States will continue to provide life-saving humanitarian assistance, including to Rohingya and other vulnerable populations in Chin, Kachin, Rakhine, and Shan states. We will also continue working to maintain and improve the health of the people of Myanmar, including combating COVID-19. And we will strengthen the ability of civil society to guard democratic space, support independent media, and promote peace and reconciliation. And we ask that together the whole world speaks with one voice and condemn the military's detention of State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi, President Win Myint, and hundreds of other civilian officials and human rights defenders. We must all call for their immediate release. We must all condemn attacks on journalists, activists, and peaceful protesters. And we must all condemn the military's restrictions on freedom of expression, including freedom to seek, receive, and impart information. We urge every member state here today to use any channel available to tell the Myanmar military that violence against the people of Myanmar will not be tolerated. Together, we all show the people of Myanmar that the world is watching. We hear them, and we stand with them. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States, and it is the first participant to the meeting. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the General Assembly as the representative of the host country. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh.
I thank you, Mr. President, and I thank you for convening today's timely meeting and for your statement. I also wish to add my voice to yours to warmly congratulate and welcome our new colleague, the permanent representative of the United States. My delegation aligns itself with the statement, Mr. President, delivered by the permanent representative of Saudi Arabia on behalf of OIC. Allow me to add a few points in our national capacity as an affected country to highlight the Rohingya situation. Let me begin by thanking the Special Envoy for her comprehensive briefing on the current situation in Myanmar. The situation is a matter of grave concern. As an immediate neighbor, we would like to see peace and stability in Myanmar. We hope that the democratic process and constitutional arrangements will be upheld and restored there. It is regrettable that the Special Envoy has not been allowed to visit Myanmar to assess the situation on the ground. We ardently hope that Myanmar would engage with the Office of the Special Envoy, which was established by the UN General Assembly with overwhelming mandate. We would also like to take this opportunity to request the Special Envoy to utilize every opportunity to keep the member states duly apprised of her current activities and future work plan in Myanmar as mandated by the GA resolution. Mr. President, Bangladesh has been hosting over 1 million Myanmar nationals, the Rohingyas, who fled their homes in the face of atrocities and took shelter in Bangladesh in multiple phases. From humanitarian commitments, my Prime Minister opened the border and provided them with much-needed shelter and protection. However, like any other people, the Rohingyas want to return home. They want a safe and stable future in their own country. With support from the international community, we have been making every effort for their repatriation in a sustainable and dignified manner. We have been working with the Myanmar government as well under bilateral and other frameworks to begin the repatriation process. We expect these processes to resume and be expedited to achieve a durable solution to this grave human rights and humanitarian crisis. We count on the continued cooperation and support of the international community in this regard. Mr. President, lack of progress in repatriation in the last 3 years have led to widespread frustration and despair among the Rohingya population in Cox's Bazar, and one manifestation of that is their perilous journey by sea for a better future. The current developments are not helping the situation. Further delay in repatriation may exacerbate the situation. Peace and prosperity of the region hinges critically on the success in ensuring sustainable return and reintegration of the displaced persons in their places of origin. We believe that full and effective implementation of the recommendations of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State, including the establishment of a clear pathway to citizenship of the Rohingyas, would be critical to resolve the lingering Rohingya crisis. Equally important would be to ensure accountability and justice for the massive violations of human rights of the Rohingyas. We earnestly hope that this Assembly would remain engaged in finding a comprehensive resolution to this crisis. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bangladesh. Now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I thank you for organizing this briefing of the Special Envoy in response to the letter we jointly sent with other member states on the basis of the mandate that this Assembly has adopted less than 2 months ago. At that time, who would have expected such a fast and terrible turn of events? A military coup trampling the rights of the people of Myanmar, disrupting the transition to democratic order, violently oppressing peaceful dissent, and serving the narrow interests of a detached and unaccountable military with a decades-long record of violence and mismanagement. The report of the Special Envoy is extremely concerning and puts the international community to the test. We are grateful for the clear words that the Secretary General himself has found to condemn this coup, demanding an immediate end to the repression. From all corners of the world, those words resonate in similar strong reactions. States from the region and Myanmar's fellow ASEAN members have the most impactful voice, as reflected also in the Security Council statement. We look at them to stand in support of the people of Myanmar and stability in the region. Mr. President, we must all listen to the loud and clear voice of the people of Myanmar themselves, as we have witnessed earlier today in the courageous statement of our colleague from Myanmar. Support their bravery and their resilience against violent oppression and against the attempt to send them back to the dark times. They represent the values that the United Nations is built on, and we have a collective responsibility to stand up for them. We call on the authorities to exercise maximum restraint, refrain from further violence, release all political prisoners, and to stand down to allow for a process of restoring democracy. At the same time, the international community must ensure that arms transfers into Myanmar are stopped without delay in light of the evident disposition of the authorities to use weapons against civilians in blatant violation of international law. The Security Council has the primary responsibility in this respect. We also call on the authorities to facilitate the visit of the Special Envoy without further delay. This Assembly has a duty to remain seized of the situation, including on the question of arms transfers, and to act in light of the situation on the ground and the ability of the Security Council to take effective action itself. Mr. President, this is a political and a security crisis, but its immediate consequences are felt by the people of Myanmar as a violation of their fundamental rights and freedoms, as excessive violence by police and military, denial of freedom of expression or association, of political participation, and of accountability. Some of the same forces responsible for mass atrocities against the Rohingya and other minorities now engage in oppression of peaceful protesters who claim that the Myanmar Constitution guarantees to them. The climate of systematic impunity for the gravest crimes committed in Myanmar in recent history has been the breeding ground for more violence, contributing to lowering inhibitions where the deterrence of the full effect of the law would be needed. It is not too late for the Security Council to do the right thing and to refer the situation in Myanmar in its entirety to the International Criminal Court. At the same time, the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar does important work. International crimes, including crimes against humanity, fall under the mechanism's mandate also if committed today. For those crimes, there is no expiration date. When Myanmar returns to democracy and to the rule of law, as it will, its future can be based on justice. We look forward to the General Assembly following up to the briefing today in short time and with a concrete outcome if needed. The people of Myanmar deserve the full support of the international community in their struggle for freedom. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Brunei Darussalam.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. I appreciate the convening of this informal meeting and welcome the briefing by Ms. Christine Burgener, the Special Envoy of the Secretary General on the situation in Myanmar. Brunei Darussalam is closely following the developments in Myanmar and reaffirms that the political stability in all ASEAN member states is essential to achieving a peaceful, stable, and prosperous ASEAN community. In this regard, we would like to refer to the ASEAN's chairman's statement on the development in the Republic of the Union of Myanmar that was issued on the 1st of February, where we recall the purpose and principle enshrined in the ASEAN Charter, including the adherence to the principle of democracy, the rule of law, and good governance, respect for and protection of human rights and fundamental freedom, which are also consistent with the UN Charter. We encourage the pursuit of dialogue and reconciliation to ensure the return to normalcy in accordance with the will and interests of the people of Myanmar. As chair of ASEAN, Brunei Darussalam stands ready to work both towards a positive and peaceful outcome. Mr. President, we appreciate the work of the Secretary General of ASEAN in leading the implementation of the recommendation of the preliminary needs assessment, look forward to the conduct of the comprehensive needs assessment, and encourage the Secretary General of ASEAN to continue identifying possible areas to effectively facilitate the repatriation process. Therefore, we also support efforts in ensuring that the framework for cooperation as agreed by Myanmar, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and the United Nations Development Programme. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Brunei Darussalam. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, I thank you for convening this important and timely meeting and for your comprehensive statement. I would also like to thank Special Envoy Ms. Burgener for her briefing. I also wish to pay tribute to our colleague from Myanmar and commend him for his valiant speech and principled position. Mr. President, we are deeply concerned and strongly condemn the coup d'etat that took place in Myanmar on the 1st of February. Let us be clear, any step to undermine the civilian rule is unacceptable. Any effort to challenge the democratic processes is illegitimate. There is no alternative to elected government which represent the will of the people. Make no mistake, military interventions do not bring stability, security, or prosperity. Military interventions result in suffering of the people. Military rule means systematic violation of human rights. Military takeover is the cause of more major socio-economic problems all over the world. Today, the international community must be united to give a strong and clear message. Military uniforms have no place in politics. Democracy is the only legitimate form of governance, and democratic processes must be respected. Mr. President, we call on military authorities in Myanmar to immediately release all elected officials, politicians, and other detained civilians. All restrictions placed on the elected leaders and democratic institutions must be removed. The elections that took place on 8 November 2020 was hailed by the international community as open and fair. We call for the convening of the new parliament that was formed through the free will of the Myanmar people after the elections and restoration of the democratically elected government as soon as possible. We are also deeply concerned about the prospects of escalation of the crisis by violent suppression of protests following the declaration of martial law. The military must show restraint and respect people's right to assemble peacefully and express their opinions. Turkey will continue to closely monitor the human rights situation in Myanmar through the UN mechanisms. We were among the countries that supported convening of the special session of the Human Rights Council on Myanmar on 12 February. We have also co-sponsored the resolution adopted by consensus at that session. Mr. President, the military intervention also risks worsening the already dire humanitarian situation and the vulnerability of refugees and internally displaced persons. I would like particularly underline the ongoing plight of Rohingya Muslims in the country. We urge the Myanmar military to ensure free and unhindered humanitarian access to all conflict-affected areas and vulnerable communities. We are seriously concerned that the current developments also reduce the prospects for the voluntary, safe, and dignified return of Rohingya refugees. We expect Myanmar military to continue working with UN institutions towards creating conducive conditions for their return. We call on military authorities to fully implement the recommendations of Rakhine Advisory Commission and the Independent Commission of Inquiry to address the root causes of conflict and to ensure accountability for serious human rights violations in the country. We urge Myanmar to fully comply with the provisional measures ordered by the International Court of Justice in January 2020 as the first international court ruling against Myanmar since the atrocities have started. It's a strong ruling and has given hope to Rohingya Muslims around the world. We commend the remarkable and exemplary work of Gambia, who demonstrated the importance of human rights and dignity and has made it a national priority to fight for the Rohingya. Lastly, let me extend our support to the Secretary General's call to urgently allow the Special Envoy to visit Myanmar and assess the situation firsthand. Turkey will continue to follow the situation in Myanmar and to encourage the authorities to return to the democratic path as soon as possible. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Turkey. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this important meeting, and I would also like to thank Madam Special Envoy for her briefing. Indonesia appreciates and renders her full support to the works of the Special Envoy. To date, Minister Marsudi of Indonesia has maintained intensive communications and engagement with Madam Special Envoy. And just yesterday, Foreign Minister Marsudi also communicated with the UN Secretary General to discuss efforts to address the issue in Myanmar. The Secretary General expressed appreciation for Indonesia's tireless efforts to find solutions for the issue at hand. Excellencies, since the very beginning, Indonesia has expressed deep concerns on the recent development in Myanmar. All of us should play its role in addressing the issue. For Indonesia, we wish to emphasize three principal positions to address the issue in Myanmar. First, the safety, well-being, and protection of all the people in Myanmar is the #1 priority. We continue to urge all parties to exercise utmost restraint and to refrain from any violence or use of force to avoid any casualties and bloodshed. Second, the only option is restoring democracy back on its track in accordance with the wishes of the people of Myanmar. Third, as Myanmar is a member of ASEAN, it is vital to uphold the principle of ASEAN Charter, particularly adherence to the rule of law, good governance, the principle of democracy and constitutional government, as well as respect for fundamental freedoms and human rights. Indonesia believes that regional mechanism, in this case ASEAN, should be fully utilized to address this issue. In this regard, the international community must work in synergy with ASEAN and provide space for ASEAN to find solutions in Myanmar. On our part, our President has underlined the importance for ASEAN to meet and discuss the issue. He also instructed Foreign Minister Marsudi to consult with ASEAN Chair as well as other ASEAN foreign ministers. Since then, Foreign Minister Marsudi has intensified communications and consultation with other ASEAN foreign ministers, among others through the subtle diplomacy. Indonesia believes that continued communications and consultation is a primary tool to express concerns, convey hopes, and find solutions to put democracy back on track. Indonesia remains highly committed to contribute toward efforts to promote peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. In closing, Mr. President, The current situation in Myanmar should not distract us from creating conditions necessary for the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of displaced Rohingya and other minorities. For far too long, the people of Rohingya has suffered. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to start by thanking the Special Envoy of the Secretary General, Ms. Christine Burgener, for her briefing. Japan commends her tireless work to engage Myanmar and cooperate with the member states, especially in the region. And I would also like to highly commend the courageous message delivered by our colleague PR of Myanmar, Key. We stand by the people of Myanmar. Japan has grave concerns over the situation caused by the military coup in Myanmar. Japan has consistently and strongly supported the process of democratization in Myanmar, and therefore, we cannot help but to feel deep disappointment and sadness. Japan opposes any action which goes against the democratization process, and we strongly urge the Myanmar military to release those who were detained, including State Councillor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, and to swiftly restore Myanmar's democratic political system. Japan is also seriously concerned about the rising tensions on the ground. In particular, Japan strongly condemns the shooting of protesters by the Myanmar security apparatus, and we would like to offer our condolences to the bereaved and express our heartfelt sympathies to the injured. Japan strongly urges the security apparatus to immediately halt the use of force against the public. Using lethal forces against peaceful protesters can never be tolerated. Furthermore, Japan is concerned about the negative impact of the current political and social unrest on people's lives, especially given the human security crisis caused by the COVID-19. We urge the Myanmar authorities to provide necessary protection for those people in need and secure access to the UN and other organizations engaged in humanitarian activities in the field. Lastly, while we should bear in mind the circumstances in Myanmar as we aim to address these concerns, the utmost priority should go to ensuring freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom to live in dignity to people in Myanmar. They are the ones to play the leading part in building a society where they can enjoy all their rights and fully develop their potential. Japan will continue to be engaged in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this important meeting. Many thanks also to the Special Envoy for her briefing on Myanmar. I would also like to salute the courageous statement of the Permanent Representative of Myanmar today. Albania has joined the statement delivered by the EU, and I wish to add the following remarks in my national capacity. Albania joins the international community in strongly condemning the military coup in Myanmar carried out on February 1st and all violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Albania also firmly condemns the violent repression of the military authorities and security forces against peaceful, unarmed protesters. Mr. President, the military coup in Myanmar is threatening to undo years of efforts to strengthen the democratic institutions in the country. The attempt to seize power and forcibly overturn the will of the people expressed at the elections of 8 November 2020 is illegal and unacceptable. Albania calls on the military authorities to end the state of emergency and restore the legitimate civilian government. We also call for the immediate and unconditional release of President U Win Mint, State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi, and all these sentenced and arbitrarily arrested for peacefully expressing their views. Albania supports the mandate of UN Special Envoy to engage in dialogue in an attempt to de-escalate the crisis. We urge the military authorities to allow her entry into the country and ensure her access to all stakeholders. Mr. President, while the attention of the international community is currently focused on the grave political situation in Myanmar, it is important also to not lose sight of the dire situation of the Rohingya Muslim minority, which has become even worse now following the military coup, but also the surge of COVID-19 pandemic. Albania urges the Myanmar authorities to address the root causes of the crisis in Rakhine State and to create the necessary conditions for the voluntary, safe, and sustainable return to their homeland of hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees. In concluding, I would like to emphasize that Albania, together with the international community, stands with the people of Myanmar and supports their aspirations for a return to democratic governance and rule of law. The world is watching. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Albania. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to join others in thanking the Special Envoy for her briefing today and also pay tribute to the powerful statement of my colleague, the Permanent Representative of Myanmar. The United Kingdom condemns the military coup in Myanmar and the arbitrary detention of members of the democratically elected civilian government, including State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi and President Win Myint, and civil society. We call for those arbitrarily detained to be immediately and unconditionally released. We need assurances of their safety and well-being. We stand with the people of Myanmar, who are now bravely exercising their democratic right to protest this coup. Their wishes and the result of the November 2020 general election must be respected. The situation in Myanmar continues to deteriorate. Peaceful protests are suppressed, peaceful exercise of freedoms inhibited by restrictions. 3 protesters have died. We call on the military and the police to exercise utmost restraint and respect human rights and international law. Firing live ammunition on unarmed protesters must stop. 3 weeks have passed since Security Council members issued a robust, unified statement. Today's General Assembly discussion represents the grave concern of the whole international community for the people of Myanmar and for the country's peaceful and democratic future. Mr. President, I wish to make 3 points. First, the international community and the United Nations has a vital role to play. We express our strong support for the continued efforts of the Special Envoy on Myanmar to secure a peaceful return of Myanmar to its path towards democracy. We call on the military authorities urgently to allow the Special Envoy to visit Myanmar and assess the situation firsthand. Regional partners in particular have a critical role to play, and it's important that the UN engages with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and others in progressing any solution. We welcome the ASEAN Chair's statement of the 1st of February and ASEAN's ongoing efforts. Second, the military should face the consequences of their actions. As such, the United Kingdom has sanctioned 19 individuals in the upper echelons of the Tatmadaw, each responsible for serious human rights violations. We urge others urgently to explore the possibility of sanctions to deter further atrocities and encourage the reinstatement of democracy. The UK has also conducted a review of our aid to Myanmar to ensure that money does not support the military. We're also encouraging UK businesses to ensure that they're not engaging with military-owned enterprises. We encourage others to do the same. Third, it is vital that we do not forget the most vulnerable in Myanmar. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya and other minorities continue to suffer as they remain confined to their villages and IDP camps across the country. Notwithstanding the deterioration of the security situation in Myanmar since the coup, the international community and the UN should continue to encourage Myanmar to work towards creating conducive conditions for the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh in consultation with them. Additionally, displaced and vulnerable communities in Myanmar, including the Rohingya, as well as vulnerable host communities, should continue to receive humanitarian assistance. In this context, humanitarian agencies should have free and unhindered access to these communities. Mr. President, I would like to conclude by reading an extract of a letter from the committee representing Bidaun Zuhlutdor, which represents the views of 380 democratically elected MPs. It reads, "Now is not the time for the international community to tolerate the actions committed by the military. We urge the United Nations and international community to support Myanmar's democracy and its people." I thank the Special Envoy again for her excellent briefing and continued hard work. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Mr. President, let me start by thanking the UN Special Envoy, the Secretary General, Her Excellency Christine Schraner, for her comprehensive briefing and her readiness to be with us today. It is crucial to exchange about the situation, the current situation in Myanmar, and we would like to thank you for organizing that briefing. And I would also like to thank the representative of Myanmar, our colleague, for his very courageous statement. Switzerland is gravely concerned by the situation in Myanmar, and we condemn the taking of power by the Burmese army. My country opposes all attempts of alteration of the results of the general elections of 8 November 2020. Switzerland asks for the immediate release of President U Win Mint and Her Excellency Aung San Suu Kyi, as much as all persons who have been arrested. My country has actively supported the democratic transition. We ask for an immediate restart of dialogue and democratic process towards more freedom, sustainable peace, respect for human rights, and the development of the country. Switzerland stands ready to support all efforts for dialogue and reconciliation. We ask the military authorities to respect international law, in particular international humanitarian law and human rights, and we strongly ask to refrain from all acts of violence against the population, in particular against peaceful protesters. We request the military authorities to respect all fundamental rights, in particular freedom to assembly, to express opinions and exchange information, and we expect that they guarantee complete and immediate access to the internet. It is crucial that humanitarian organizations have access to the entire country, and it is crucial that the Rohingya refugees can return on the basis of international standards. Switzerland asks for accountability for all violations of international law. They have to be investigated by a credible, transparent, and independent and impartial investigation. All efforts have to be strengthened, and we asked also the authorities to collaborate with the independent mechanism of investigation. And allow me also to underline our strong support for our Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Myanmar and her important work in this country. My country appreciates that the Special Envoy has good relation and trust with all different parties concerned in Myanmar, but also beyond the borders. Her relations are the basis of dialogue to find peaceful solutions for this crisis. And we therefore ask the military authorities to invite her to Myanmar as soon as possible and to make it possible that she can meet also Commander-in-Chief General Min Aung Hlaing and Her Excellency Aung San Suu Kyi. And let me finish by a quote of our Special Envoy. I quote, "It's a people's fight without arms," unquote. So Dear colleagues, let's stand by the people. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Thank you, Madam President. We join together to thank the Special Envoy for her briefing today, and we appreciate her efforts in maintaining dialogue and exchanges with concerned parties in Myanmar, and encourage her further engagement in such a thoughtful manner. Madam President, the ongoing complicated development in Myanmar are detrimental to stability, development, and the legitimate interests of the Myanmar people. We call on concerned parties to exercise restraint, refrain from action that would increase tension, conduct dialogue toward a satisfactory solution in accordance with the Constitution and the law of Myanmar, and with the will and aspiration of its people, thus creating a favorable condition for the smooth democratic process and ensuring the safety and security for Myanmar people, unimpeded access for humanitarian relief and essential service for Myanmar people. We hope stability will soon return to the country for its own development and for peace, stability in the region. The international community should make efforts to support and facilitate the smooth democratic transition process in Myanmar while respecting the principle of national independence, sovereignty, and non-interference in internal affairs. In this regard, we support the Special Envoy for good offices and encourage a coordination between the Special Envoy and ASEAN aimed at involving all relevant stakeholders to stabilize the situation. ASEAN continues its support for Myanmar efforts to bring peace, stability, and uphold the rule of law, promote harmony and reconciliation among the various communities, as well as ensure the sustainable and equitable development in Myanmar. And recently, ASEAN Chair issued a chair statement recalling the purpose and principles of ASEAN Charter, reiterating also the political stability in ASEAN member states is essential to achieving a peaceful, stable, and progress of ASEAN community, and encouraging the pursuit of dialogue, reconciliation, and the return to normalcy in accordance with the will and interest of the people of Myanmar. In addition, as mentioned by our ASEAN colleague earlier, ASEAN has been making efforts to hold an informal ASEAN ministerial meeting on this matter very soon. And we call on the international community to support ASEAN effort in this endeavor. Madam President, the ongoing situation in Myanmar is being closely followed by the international community, and we recognize both bilateral and multilateral efforts have been made with a view to bringing stability to the country. All approaches should mutually reinforce one another, and we must keep working together, particularly to reduce the risk of violence. Any measure should be preceded by a carefully review and evaluation of potential consequences, especially at a time when millions of people in Myanmar are suffering from the economic fallout and the COVID-19 pandemic. Constructive dialogue, cooperation, and confidence-building measures with emphasis on the people are essential to resolving the current situation. Madam President, to conclude, we reiterate our continued support to the promotion of dialogue among concerned parties for the benefits of the Myanmar people and for peace and stability in the region. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Vietnam, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Costa Rica, followed by Canada and Singapore.
Yeah.